Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Napoleon and we're back with another Enlisted video. Today we're going to be doing the guy on the M1 Garand, an American semi-automatic rifle in Enlisted. This video will cover the weapon, the history, and what you should know for use the weapon in Enlisted. So without further ado, let's get started. But before we do, this video has been made possible for the friends at Discord, meaning that if you haven't liked, subscribed, or joined the Discord, I highly suggest that you do that. But that said, let's get started with the M1 Garand. One of the best American semi-automatic rifles. The history of the first semi-automatic rifle ever widely adopted as a standard military arm began after the start of the First World War, when the inventor John C. Garand, a Canadian then living in the USA, began to develop a semi-automatic rifle or self-loading rifle. He worked at the government-owned Springfield Armory and during the 1920s and early 1930s developed a number of designs. The first prototype from 1919 to 1924 was built using the unusual primer-activated ballback, which worked well, but due to the new progressive building and burning propellant system, it was unsuitable for a military rifle, so he switched to the more common gas-operated system. He filed a patent for his semi-automatic gas-operated felt-clip rifle in 1930 and received a U.S. patent for his design in 1932. The rifle was built around then experimental 0.276 caliber or 7mm cartridge. At the same time, the weapon was tested by the U.S. Army against its main competitor, a 0.276 Pedersen rifle, which was eventually recommended for U.S. Army in early 1932. Shortly after, U.S. General MacArthur stated that the U.S. military will stick to the old 0.306 cartridge, foreseeing that the Garand already had a variant of this design chambered in 0306. Finally, on the 6th of January 1936, the Garand was adopted by the U.S. Army as the rifle 03 caliber M1. Early issue rifles, however, showed quite poor characteristics, jamming such often for a decent military arm. As a result, a lot of noise was raised that eventually reached the US Congress. In 1939, a major redesignation was ordered, and the M1 Garand quickly redesigned the gas-operated port system, which was greatly improved the reliability. Almost all M1 rifles of the time or early issues were quickly rebuilt to adopt the new gas system, so very few original M1 Garands survive to this present day, and those that are extremely expensive collective weapons. When the Americans entered World War II, the mass production of the M1 rifles was set at the Springfield Armory and the Winchester Armory. During the war, both companies built around 4 million M1 rifles, making the M1 Garand the most widely used semi-automatic rifle of World War II. During the war, the M1 Garand proved to be a reliable and powerful weapon. There were minor attempts to improve it during the war, but these were not leave experimental stages except for two sniper modifications, the M1C and the M1D. Both were approved for service in 1945, and both featured a telescopic scope, which wears off-sight to the left due to the top-loading feature of the M1 Garand, and after the war, the production of the M1 Garand in the United States was stopped. And both rifles were also licensed to be built and sold to other countries, such as Italy and Denmark. After the outbreak of the Korean War in 1950, the production of the M1 for the US forces was resumed in early 1952. The recommended rifle was then manufactured as, once again, Springfield Armory, which was also known as Harling and Renson Company, H&R, and International Harvester Company. Those companies manufactured M1s until 1955, and the Springfield Armory produced the M1 Garand until 1957. But that's it, that's the history, let's move on to the characteristics. In terms of the characteristics, the M1 Garand is a gas-operated, magazine-fed, semi-automatic rifle. The original M1 was using gas that was trapped from a muzzle led by the special muzzle extension, but this was proven unreliable, and since 1939, M1 rifles were built with a gas system that used the gas port drilled in the barrel near the muzzle. The trapped gas was directed into the gas cylinder under the barrel, where it was operated a long-stroke gas piston integrated with the integrated rod. The loading operation robust to house it inside the remaining rod and return with the extension, and then carry the bolt operating groove at the left and then charging handle at the right. The groove was then connected to the rotating bolt located inside the receiver, and the bolt had two locking lugs that locked into the receiver walls. Where the gun was fired, hot powder glass led to the gas chamber and the gas piston, which then drove back the operating rod. The bolt acting operating groove interacted with the stud on the bolt, relocated the bolt to unlock it, and then retracted to commence the reloading cycle. And that is all it for the characteristics. Let's move on to the stats. In terms of the stats, the M1 Garand is a semi-automatic rifle used by the US Army. It is chambered in 7.62, has hit power of 12, damage reduction over time of 12, 9.8, 8, 6.6, 5.4, 1.4, and 0.7 at 10, 100, 200, 300, 400, 1000, and 1500 meters. The armor penetration is going to be the same for every weapon. The muzzle velocity is 830 meters per second, rate of fire 320, reload time of 2.9, vertical recoil of 105, horizontal recoil 33, fed magazine of 8 rounds, and that is the 3-star M1 Garand. The 6-star M1 Garand is once again chambered in 7.62, hit power of 14.4, with a damage reduction over distance at 14.4, 11.8, 9.6, 7.9, 6.5, 1.7, 0.9 at 10, 100, 200, 300, 400, 1000, and 1500 meters. Muzzle velocity at 830 meters per second, rate of fire of 350, reload time of 2.9, vertical recoil at 89, and horizontal at 28. And that is all it in terms of stats for the M1 Garand. Let's move on to the recap section. In terms of the overall stats of the Garand, despite being one of the most produced semi-automatic rifles in history, this one is actually one of the worst semi-automatic rifles in game. The Garand is not that bad compared to other weapons such as the, let's say, the SVT G43, but I will once again use the G43, the SVT40 over this thing, and the reason is not only because it does have better sights in my opinion, but it also does have 2 more box round magazines. So 2 more rounds is not that impressive when you think about it, but it is really impressive when you're actually starting to use this. As a matter of fact, I would say this thing is better than the Amaguera, and that is putting it very mildly. The M1 Garand, despite being a very good rifle, does have its fatal shortcomings, and once again, it does not have to do with the ping sound. And yeah, the big reason is, once again, the 8-round magazine, in which, once again, the 8-round magazine is going to be a pain. Those 2 rounds are the big issue of why this is in one of the worst, and the weapons like the SVT G43 are one of the best semi-automatic rifles. Once again, it is not that far. You're still gonna get kills if you land your hits. As a matter of fact, I've been using this thing as long range, and this actually has been paying off. So once again, I really like the M1 Garand, especially for campaigns such as Tunisia, and the reload is way faster than the Gewehr 41, so that has it for that. But that said, this is the M1 Garand for you. A very good, but one of the worst semi-automatic rifles. And that said, guys, this is all it for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the Discord, and I'll see you in the next one. Now before you leave, I would like to thank you very much for watching this video. I would be honored if you could like and subscribe to the channel. Remember, more videos are coming out, so it is a good idea to click on that notification button. Anyways, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.